nation's brightest entrepreneurial minds. That such a conclave is taking place not in Mumbai or Delhi or Gurgaon, but here in Bhubaneswar is no surprise to me. I think because our country is increasingly becoming an entrepreneurship-driven economy, and the opportunities are no longer confined to the old centers, the old metros, the centers of business and power in the country. They have permeated our landscape, and Indians across the board have embraced the idea of entrepreneurship with enthusiasm and spirit. I was just talking to a few students in the green room before coming to address you. One of them has already got a startup, and another one, a third-year student, told me that she was going to join this colleague's startup. Now, this is the kind of conversation we would never have had in a university in India when I was a student. That's the change. Of course, the tradition of Indian entrepreneurship can hardly be said to be a new one. Indians abroad have already proved themselves as entrepreneurs. Going back 100 years in Africa, for example, in East Africa, there are startups in Silicon Valley, which, as you know, are all, I think 40% of all the startups in Silicon Valley involve Indians. Bangalore has become a sort of Silicon Plateau, and I'm told in Mumbai there's a place called Powai Valley for the increasing number of startups that are located there. All these have gone on to change our outlook on the world. But the manner in which there is a proliferation of startups in India, the expectation, by the way, is that by 2020 there will be 11,000 startups in India. And this tells, it seems to me, a much larger story. Most of you who are children of the late 1980s and 90s, I guess, most of you would have been born in the 1990s, some of you in the late 1980s, you will probably not even recognize the India that those of us who are older grew up in back then. Today, the options available to you are literally countless. I remember after my days in college, how few were the options available to graduating youngsters in the India of the 1970s, 1960s or early 70s. That's the vintage that I grew up in and I can recall best. There are certainly today more subjects that you can study, and courses are available that didn't even exist in those days. Far more kinds of jobs and career options are on offer to you than we could have dreamed of back then. Our economy was still a very closed, socialist, protectionist one, and international exposure was limited. The word globalization hadn't even been coined. Today the world is smaller, opportunities are far greater, and today's graduates have a wide variety of choices in India and outside that were unknown to previous generations, including my own. India's economy has, of course, transformed itself dramatically since the liberalization of 1991, when Dr. Manmohan Singh, who was then the finance minister, stood up and told the Lok Sabha that no power on earth could stop an idea whose time had come. That idea was the liberalization of the Indian economy, which has given us the growth and diversity that allowed us to weather the storms that confronted the global economy after the crisis of 2008 and onwards. Last year, in 2015, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, predicted that despite all that's happening here and around the globe, the Indian economy will be the fastest growing major economy in the world. And we're living up to that. A few years ago, we overtook Japan to become the world's third largest economy in PPP, or purchasing power parity terms. But in many ways, the best is yet to come, because we have you on our side. Age is on our side. You are the builders of our country and of our economy, and we are the youngest major economy in the world. At a time when many of our potential competitors, China, Japan, South Korea, are facing a serious demographic squeeze, and of course the rest of the world is aging. In Europe, the average age by 2020 will be 46. In Japan, it's going to be 47. Even in youthful America, it's going to be 40. In India, by 2020, the average age will be 29. So, we have this huge young population, people like you, 50.1% under 25, 65% under 35. A young country, and you as young, fresh graduates will be joining a dynamic, competitive, productive, youthful workforce which could be the engine of the world, even taking over from China. In fact, the International Labour Organization, the ILO, has predicted that by 2020, we will have in India 116 million workers in the job-starting age group of 20 to 24, whereas China will only have 94 million. These numbers suggest that we will have the labour force that could change the world. Our situation will compare very well with the industrialized world. As the industrialized world's labour force will go down by 4% at that time, by 2020, China's will go down by 5% by 2020, and India's will increase by 32%. So as far as the age structure is concerned, as soon as our potential, our demographic potential is concerned, it's a huge competitive advantage, and this is the time for us to seize that advantage. But, and that's why your applause might have been premature, that demographic dividend will only work in our favor if we can educate and train our young people to seize the opportunities available to them in the 21st century. Opportunities that entrepreneurs like you are creating. You know, those of you who are at KIIT, obviously for you the world is your oyster. But for everyone else in the country who's less fortunate, less privileged, the question marks still abound. Our demographic dividend could become a demographic disaster if we continue to produce legions of uneducated or undereducated, unemployed and often unemployable young men. Because these are very frustrated young men. And I say men, by the way, because we've had Maoist incidents in 165 districts of our country, including 1 or 2 in this station. And these are young men who work because they have no jobs and will have no jobs because they've not been educated or trained. They will have no stake in our society because we haven't equipped them to be part of it. Before coming here, I went to see KISS, where tribal children are being educated and trained. Frankly, I wish we had hundreds of KISSes right across the country. Like a Hollywood movie. They say a Hollywood movie you get hundreds of kisses, right? But we do with those here in our country, in every tribal district. Because you're giving them not just an education, through that you're giving them hope, you're giving them an opportunity to seize the possibilities that are open to them in our economy in the 21st century. Imagine how even semi-skilled, partly trained labor is being soaked up today. And yet employers are complaining they don't have enough educated, trained people available for many jobs. How can we possibly be the new China if we don't have people who can do the jobs that being a new China requires? This is what I really want to see happening. And in a sense, of course, at a different level, at the white-collar level, this is where you come in. Harnessing young India's potential and bringing about the social and economic transformations we all hope for will require highly educated and motivated individuals to provide leadership across all sectors of our economy. It's because of this that India's burgeoning entrepreneurial ambitions remain a significant weapon in our national arsenal as we march towards greater economic growth. While we celebrate those who've created a distinctive brand India by building phenomenal business empires that are known around the world, our chances have been strengthened by the fact that in recent years there's a proliferation of small and medium-level entrepreneurial ventures. Some will succeed, Some will fail, but they will all energize our economic spaces, and they'll throw up the best available minds and talents to lead the economy and lead the country. And through doing this, we'll create a new ecosystem of entrepreneurial effort. And the right mindset is often half the battle won in finding the right solution. So addressing all of you would-be entrepreneurs, I'm quite confident that we'll be able to find answers to the problems faced by India and the world at large. 69 years of independence as a nation. We're celebrating Independence Day just the day after tomorrow, our 69th Independence Day. We've often found creative solutions to our problems. I feel immense pride when I recall how far we have come since 1947. How the skills of our citizens and our leaders have allowed us to grow so much since 1947 when the British left us, with a legacy of just 0.08% annual growth. That was the British rate of growth in the entire first 47 years of the 20th century. They left us with 17% literacy. We had a life expectancy of just 27, and 90% of our population lived below the poverty line. Let's never forget that that was a condition in which we found our country upon independence. We've come a long way since then, and we should be proud of it. Indeed, Dr. Achyuta Samantha could not be here today because of the tragedy in his family. He lost his mother. But he set a remarkable example of what's possible with effort and determination in this country, building against all odds an organization that is seeking to set new and better standards every year. I'm told with 5,000 rupees in his hands, he ventured out stories, as we've had from Dr. Samantha. Stories that can be told by young people, including all of you here in this room. You can go out and be the next Dr. Samanthas. Why not be better than what KIIT is? Of course, the constraints are creativity and perseverance. That's what you're always required to do. You know, we have to count upon that, the spirit of enterprise being instilled in each of you. How India's pulse beats very often is through creative solutions of various sorts. I was encouraged and amused to see that there are studies being conducted in business schools around the world of the Dabbawalas of Mumbai, or the Sulabh International Toilet Builders of North India, or even Lalu Prasad Yadav's railway reforms, been studied at Harvard Business School and the curriculum of other business schools around the world, because our indigenous business practices are actually attracting attention from global institutions. Our Indian principle of jugaad, of course, is becoming institutionalized as well. Not only as something which, as the critics have been saying, is something that people use to twist their way around the system to get things done or to cut corners. That's not something we can admire. I'm aware that some say that jugaad is not good enough because it's just about simply making do, whereas we should be striving for excellence. But I think jugaad is actually more than that. To me, it's about new ways of thinking out of the box, repurposing things, making do with what you've got within your resource constraints, creating solutions, thinking creatively, originally, and most important, to bring non-traditional solutions to traditional issues. So an Indian villager who constructs a makeshift vehicle out of a bullock cart and a tractor engine or whatever to transport his livestock and goods, forget a tractor engine, sometimes he uses an irrigation hand pump as an engine in order to move his cart faster. To my mind, that's actually admirable. That is jugaad. But he can't afford a car or a vehicle or a tempo or a truck, and this makes do and it solves his immediate needs. Common machines and household objects are being reincarnated across India in ways that their original manufacturers never intended. Everything is employable, reusable, reimaginable. As you know, our country, by something as simple as a mobile phone, you know, when you couldn't afford your mobile phone bills, we in India are the ones who invented the concept of the missed call. You know? Ring your parents once and they'll call you back and they'll pay them. Instead of complicating or refining products, Indian innovators often just strip them down to their bare essentials, making them affordable, accessible, durable, effective. Indian entrepreneurial ingenuity has produced a startling number of such world-beating innovations. You know, look at the Tata Nano. I know in India it's been a marketing disaster. And that's a different story the marketing classes can discuss. But just as an innovation, it cost $2,000, which was roughly the cost of a high-end DVD player in a modern Western car, luxury car. But of course there's no DVD player in the Nano, no radio either in the basic model. But its innovations have garnered 34 patents. And they're not merely the result of doing away with frills, which they've done. They've done away with power brakes, air conditioning, even side view mirrors are gone. But they've reduced the use of steel by inventing an aluminium engine. They increased space by moving the wheels to the edge of the chassis. And they relied on a modular design that enabled the car to be assembled from kits. Now, all of this proved conclusively that you could do more from less, and Indian engineers fought it out. Similarly, the mission to Mars, right, cost our scientists a grand total of $74 million, which was less than the budget of the Hollywood space movie Gravity. And about 11% of the cost that NASA incurred for its own Mars program, its last Mars rover, was $671 million. And I say this because that's part of Indian innovation. How do you repurpose things to make them more affordable? There's the GE Mac 400 invented in India. It's a handheld electrocardiogram that costs $800. The cheapest alternative costs more than $2,000. There's the Tata Swatch, a water purifier that costs $24. It's 10 times cheaper than its nearest competitor. On that electrocardiogram, it uses just 4 buttons. Every other cardiogram machine has a dozen. It has a tiny portable printer, kind of like an ATM printer, making it small enough to fit into a satchel and even run on batteries. It has reduced the cost of an ECG to just $1 per patient, which makes it affordable even for the poor people in our country. So it meets the need of serving India's poor. Similarly, the Swatch, it uses rice husks, which are very common waste products everywhere where rice is grown, and it uses them to purify water. And you know that 5 million Indians in our country die of cardiovascular diseases every year? More than a quarter of them are under 65. About 2 million Indians die from drinking contaminated water. So these innovations are actually essential for our country. They're groundbreaking as innovations, but they're also needed to serve an Indian purpose. And many other innovations. So when you Google the words frugal innovation, first 20 hits you get will all be relating to innovations in India. And it's something we can be proud of, in my view. Because if you look at all the stuff that we've innovated as frugal innovations, you'll find a low-cost, fuel-efficient mini truck, find an very inexpensive mini tractor that is now being sold profitably in the United States, a battery-powered refrigerator, a $100 electricity inverter, a $12 solar lamp. Now all of these I mentioned dollar figures because that's the international comparator in every one of these cases, of course. The world competition is completely undercut, sometimes 10% of the global cost. Medical innovations are particularly widespread. I met a young student who's working in biotech. Well, it was an Indian company that invented the cheapest hepatitis B vaccine in the world, bringing down the price from $15 per injection worldwide to less than 10 cents, okay? So that's, you work it out, the fraction for yourself. It's a tiny fraction of the global cost. Insulin's price has fallen by 40% thanks to India's leading biotech firm. A Bangalore-based company's diagnostic tool to test for tuberculosis and infectious diseases costs $200, which compares to $10,000 for comparable equipment in the Western world. In fact, I'm actually wearing something that I found a particularly creative solution for a common problem. You know, I need glasses to see at a distance, okay? I don't really need them to look at, say, my notes when I'm speaking to you or to recognize people in the first few rows here. But if I had to spot somebody in the back, I need glasses. But 95% of the day I don't wear glasses. I'm not always looking at a distance. And so I tend to lose them. I leave them behind. When I'm in Kerala as a politician, I wear a Kerala dhoti. It has no pockets, obviously. So the glasses are sitting in my lap. I get up, they fall down, and they break, or somebody steps on them in the crowd. You never know. I remember one year, I think it was 2013, the first 3 months of the year, I either lost or broke 6 pairs of glasses. So I was complaining to a friend, what is this? So this is such a nightmare. The guy says, why does this happen to you? And I said, the real problem is, for 150 years, people have never changed the design of glasses. All glasses basically sit on your ears, rest on the bridge of your nose. I find that uncomfortable, so I don't like wearing them all the time. I just take them off, except when I need them, which is 5% of the day, I don't wear them. And therefore I lose them. So he said, okay, there is a creative solution. And he came back with this. Hangs around my neck, so I don't lose it so easily. And if I do want to see somebody in the back row, all I have to do is click them into place with magnets. I can see you there. Hi. So, my point really is that thinking out of the box, coming up within our limited resources, but within our own realities, with new innovative solutions, is something we all must do. And we're beginning to do it more and more. Professor Mashelkar, my very good friend, told me that he has now launched an innovation prize. He gives a prize out of his own money every year to the most India-relevant innovation that an Indian can come up with. And last year, he gave the prize to a young man. Actually, let me tell you what the problem is the young man was trying to solve. You know that in our country, we have 15 million people who are blind, and 90-odd% of those blindness cases were preventable. They're because of glaucoma and things can be diagnosed early, simple operation, and they could have saved their eyes. Now, this test exists, it's very easy, but to test, you need to dilate your eyes, and your eyes remain dilated for many. I come first in science as well throughout, so my teachers were so upset, they called my parents to the school, and they said, this is unacceptable, he's our best science student, how is he going to take humanities? And my parents, who like every middle-class Indian family wanted me to be a doctor or an engineer, said, what's the matter with you, why don't you want to study science? And I said, Dad, I hate the subject. I just study hard for the exam, and the day after I've written the exam, I've forgotten most of what I learned for the exam. So please don't make me study, but you ask me anything on history or literature or whatever, and I can give you really clear ideas about these things. They matter to me, they engage me, I'm passionate about them. So my father said, all right, study what you want. So I did humanities. Again, I did extremely well. I came first in the States and so on in my school leaving exams. So those who'd done humanities were supposed to go off and do economics because that was the right subject if you had the marks to get in. And I said, no, I want to study history. And again, touch wood, my parents were kind enough to say, all right, if you really want to do it, study history, even though you don't need the marks you've got to get into history honors. I did. At the end of that, again, I topped the university and so on. My parents said, look, please take the IIM entrance exams. In those days, there were only 2 IIMs in the country. There was Ahmedabad and Calcutta. And they said, just take the IIM entrance exam. At least you'll make some money. You can't do anything useful like being a doctor and engineer. Go and make some money as a manager. So I wrote the exams. I managed to come first in one and second in the other. And at the same time, I got a scholarship to go and study. Believe me, I don't deserve applause. Taking exams is a knack. I don't think you should, I mean, there are people who God has given that talent to. They should be grateful to the good Lord rather than patting themselves too much on the back. But fair enough, the opportunities that gives you in our country is still very great. But anyway, I got a scholarship to go and study international affairs in America, and I took that. And you know, they had no idea what kind of career would be available to me after that. But I went and did it. I ended up stumbling into the UN, and I mean stumbling because initially when I applied to the UN from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, I was told that Indians were overrepresented, so no jobs were available for Indians. But then somebody was impressed enough with me to recommend me to a UN agency that didn't actually have national quotas, and I was the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. And they interviewed me in New York, they interviewed me in Geneva, and by that time they'd spent so much money flying me around to interview me that they decided to hire me. And I thought I'd work for a year or two, see a different part of the world, put some money in the bank and come back to India. And that year or two became 29 years before I finally came back to India.
Very well, sir.
Around, the gates are all shut, you've got to help us get around or we'll be expelled. And here was this, we were an all-male college, I should have clarified this at that time. And here was this very tarty-looking person with, hair, lipstick, skirt, you name it. And in the dark, one couldn't look very carefully, but clearly it was somebody we had to get out of the college. And I had this huge challenge of actually wanting to protect these two fellows from being expelled from college by helping them smuggle this alleged prostitute out of the campus, while at the same time I had to give them stern lectures as a senior about doing these bad things and how they were letting down college and letting down their families and so on and so forth. So I actually managed to talk the gatekeeper, the Darwan, into opening the back gate to let this fellow out when these fellows stood in the light and laughed at me saying, you were a practical joke victim, this is a fresher we dressed up to tease you. So that was
It was a magazine which he started. We caught one of our old bachelor faculty members married to the principal of Miranda House College. The marriage fortunately did not take place, but the invitees assembled at the chapel of the St. Stephen's College dutifully.
Go.
We joined the UN because I was on the UN Children's Board and then the Youth Board. So I wanted to join the UN. I wrote to your office talking about your UN Secretary General election. Your office replied back. They sent wishes from you, so that was wonderful. 4 years later, I got a full scholarship to go to Tufts, study international relations, something that you suggested in the email. And at Tufts, we talk about you all the time, and Fletcher remembers you fondly. Here's the thing. When we talk about you at Tufts and when we talk about you in India, we see in India, a number of times we talk about politics and we talk about the Barack Obama moment for this country, the Obama moment and the watershed moment for Indian politics. When we look around for people who are like really great intellect, great integrity, who are really dedicated to this nation, and can we have all 500 plus parliamentarians of that stature, so that WhatsApp jokes do not come from this country's parliament at least? Can we create a country?
Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. There's a lot to be said. I did come into politics with a very unusual background. In fact, I'm certainly the only Kerala politician who hasn't been in politics since the student days. Everybody else in my state sees politics as a sort of lifetime, full-time. So people like me are definitely unusual, and I certainly hope that will change. My view is that as our electorate becomes more educated, as our middle class grows from the present about 20% of the population to becoming 60-65% of the population, as in most developed countries, then inevitably the kinds of people they're prepared to vote for will also change, because everyone wants to be represented by people they can be proud of and not people they have to make excuses for. Right now, the kind of sensibility that informs your question represents, I'm sorry to say, a bit of a minority view. There is only a small segment of educated India that would share your assessment of someone like me. For many others, they'll say, who is this fellow? Who does he think he is? What does he know of our lives and our problems? What does he think entitles him to speak for us? In fact, one of the reasons I went the hard way into the Lok Sabha was precisely because coming back from a long career abroad, I was afraid that I would be dismissed on those very grounds. How is he entitled to speak for us? I went out to get the votes of people to be able to show that I was at least entitled to speak for my constituents and thereby for a section of the Indian electorate.